Good morning, good morning, good morning. Take two, everyone. Happy Halloween and welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels. We are going back to that horrible world known as the JRC, but before we do the usual disclaimers, sad fact I had already done a whole video, but my computer decided it wanted to freak out and sit there and say, but if you don't free up space, you can't do a video, and we're gonna just totally pause you 5 minutes in, not tell you we paused you. I want to scream. Want to scream. We're going to try to make it short and sweet, folks. In the description box, if you're unfamiliar with the Stop the Shocks campaign or the campaign against the troubled teen industry, you're going to see it right there in the description box. Please, in particular, take note of the article written by NeuroClastic, a small non-for-profit started by us autistics for autistics. In that article, they interviewed over 900 ABA professionals in regard to the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center, so called blah. I can't even talk, I'm angry. So called behavior modification program. Matter of fact, the JRC doesn't want you to read this article so much. They've threatened NeuroClastic with a defamation lawsuit if they did not remove it from the website. NeuroClastic has refused. Please read the article and share it on all your social media. We got NeuroClassic's public statement regards to the defamation lawsuit threat, as well as a link to the GoFundMe. We are crowdfunding in case the JRC sees through with their threat. Trigger warning when we discuss places like the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center, an agape boarding school for boys. You're going to hear vivid descriptions of and catch clips of surveillance footage of people with disabilities being tortured and abused. If you do got young children present, folks, please go ahead. Utilize those headphones, all right? This channel is marked not for kids for a reason. We use profanity on occasion and speak on dark subjects. If your child is 16 and younger and watching this, very obviously parental supervision is advised. All right, where we left off. The FDA's alternative interpretation of legally marketed device is unpersuasive. To the DC Circuit Court, their argument is unpersuasive. The argument that the GED device, as we all know and loathe it, as it currently exists, has not been approved by the FDA in any way, shape, or form. And the DC Circuit Court does not feel like that this is a legitimate argument to say that it is not a legally marketed device. Their reasoning is, if you watched the previous video before this, is because a doctor prescribed it. And because a doctor prescribed it, therefore it is considered legal. And interfering with a doctor prescribing this device is interfering with medicine. Allow me to give you an analogy, folks. Using this argument, if a doctor prescribed, we'll say, crack cocaine as a deterrent for depression, and the federal government got involved and had something to say about that, if we go by the logic of their argument, then the federal government would have no right to interfere, whether or not it is in regards to a narcotic being described that is considered illegal. Because after all, the doctor is prescribing it, right? So if the federal government got involved and tried to prosecute the doctor for trafficking illegal substances, they could actually use this argument to say that that would be the federal government interfering with medicine. Their argument makes no coherent sense, folks. The federal government and laws are in place to interfere with medicine all the time. Okay? They were put in place to combat the snake oil salesmen of old. All right? You can't argue on one hand that if a doctor prescribes it and you interfere, then you're interfering with medicine in regards to the GED. When if you use the same argument for a narcotic like crack cocaine, if it's prescribed by a doctor, you can say, well, then we can raid the doctor's office. You can't have it both ways. Either the FDA has this authority or they have none. Okay? This is nonsensical. It's nonsensical to those of us who've worked in the field. It's nonsensical to people with far more letters behind their name than Matthew Israel has ever had. It makes no coherent sense to me dragging in a neighbor off the street. Okay? It's a logical argument. It is legalese word salad. Okay? These folks are starting to make Elaine sound coherent. I didn't even think that was humanly possible. Jesus. The agency argues that because the Act requires a device to have a use, the appropriate construction of the device is a pairing of particular instrument with particular use. This doesn't hold water, though. DC Circuit Court, you're making me clap. I'm becoming that person now. Thanks for that. Okay. Let me remind you, DC Circuit Court. Let me remind you all. The GED device is only made in one place. Used at that place for a singular purpose. You don't see the JRC marketing the GED device to alcoholics. Okay? You don't see them marketing it out on the wider market to battle addiction, which is what the DC Circuit Court is trying to argue here. All right? What they're trying to do, once again, is conflate the SIBIS machine, which is used by particular individuals outside of this, as an argument in defense of this particular device being able to be used. But it doesn't work. Because no matter how much they want to construe that they are the same, the only way that they are the same is on the surface. They're both skin shock devices. Cool, fair enough. The difference is the reason why the GED was developed by Dr. Matthew Israel was he felt that the SIBIS machine was not causing his patients/students enough pain. His own words, folks. His own words. He created that device because the pain levels emitted by the SIBIS was no longer getting that abused child stop syndrome thing going on. Okay? The GED is used only in one place. One. The doctors who prescribe that particular device do it for a singular purpose. So this argument holds no water. The logic isn't logicking. And they're playing fast and loose with the legalese. Okay? Now, if you were to make the argument that then all skin shock devices must be banned for every purpose, possibly that might be an argument. It's bullshit, but it might be an argument. But we're not talking about the SIBIS device here. We're not talking about every single skin shock device that's ever been made. We're talking about one in particular. And to just say, well, you got to ban it for all uses, how does that make sense when it's only being used for a singular use in one place? You can't, in good faith, make that argument, is what I'm saying here. Okay? You cannot, in good faith, make that argument. Because the GED device and the SIBIS device are not the same animal. They may look similar on the surface, but on the surface is where their similarities end. The SIBIS emits a small shock to jolt you and get your attention. The GED device has been designed to maximize physical pain, used for a singular purpose. There is no other purpose for which the GED is being used. So to even try to make that argument is absolutely ridiculous to me. Okay? Absolutely ridiculous. But let's go on, shall we? It would follow that an electrical stimulation device for self-injurious and aggressive behavior is not a legally marketed device once the FDA bans that pairing of an instrument in use. That's not what the FDA said, Karen. But you're only banning it for a singular use. It's only being used for a singular reason. It's only being used for a singular reason, folks. Well, you're going to ban all the uses for it. It's only being used for one thing in one place. The FDA is not in any way, shape, or form trying to ban every single skin shock device on the market. They're trying to ban one device. But the DC Circuit Court is trying to make you believe that they're trying to ban all these devices for a singular type of use. That's not what's happening here. Not what's happening at all. The ban had to do with one skin shock device. One. Used for a singular purpose at one place. So to try and make this insane argument that, but you can't just say it can only be banned for one use and not ban it for every use when it's not being used anywhere but there. For one reason. Nobody's prescribing GED devices on the larger market to treat other issues. Again, my mother has been in healthcare and medicine for over 40 years. 40 years. She started out working in old people homes, okay? People with dementia, Alzheimer's. Some of these individuals could get particularly violent, okay? Nobody in the 90s, and I can say this with quite amount of an authority on the subject, considering I would be waiting after school for either her or my dad, who worked at the hospital together, to get off work. They were not using a skin shock device to get the more violent of the patients under control. Okay? There was no GED device in those places. None, zilch, nada. Nor were those at some of the clinics that she worked at as well being used in order to help with behaviors. Okay? All right? Wasn't happening at all. This is a singular device that the FDA is talking about. You are trying to railroad in devices that do not have any part of this conversation. Congress potentially had such an interpretation in mind, as legislative history contains references to the FDA being permitted to treat multiple uses as constituting a different device for purposes or classifications or other regulation. That is not an appropriate interpretation. It's not an appropriate interpretation. It's not anything. It's not an argument. Because the get isn't being used for multiple purposes. Do you understand, DC, what I'm telling you? Do you hear what I'm saying? This argument holds no water because, excuse me, I got an itch. Sorry about that. This argument holds no water because the GED device is not being used anywhere else in the country for any purpose at all. It is only being used at the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center. That center is only using those devices for a singular purpose. To, as they would say, consequent behaviors, or as we like to call it, trying to torture the disability out of us. What we have here is a 26-page document of nonsense. Bad faith arguments, bad legalese, bad justifications for allowing this torture to continue for another generation. That's all this is here, folks. And we're going to close on that. We don't get very many views on this channel. The few that we do tend to get removed from time to time. So, folks, please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe, and don't forget to hit the comments. I do appreciate your time. As always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea do hope you have a good one. I'll see you next vid. Bye-bye.